Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, welcome this online session. The topic for today's class is sentences and structures. Outline has the following subtopics. Number 1. Significance of grammar, patterns and text organization, interpretation. Number 2. Grammar and patterns. Number 3. Noun patterns and stylistic analysis of the text, of course, for noun patterns. Learning objective. By the end of the class, students should be able to do following. Number 1. Discuss the significance of grammar patterns in the organization, meaning making and interpretation of a text. Number 2. Orally discuss and analyze noun patterns. Number 3. Read the text, of course, for stylistic analysis with special focus on grammar and noun patterns. Significance of grammar patterns in text organization and interpretation. Grammar patterns are significant in the organization of a text. Let me explain this point, dear students. We know that a text is organized on many linguistic levels. That is, for instance, on phonological level. That is the spoken level, how we speak out a text. Now we know that on phonological level, a poem, for instance, can be rhymed and resultantly it has rhythm. Or we know that book like the Holy Quran is in many cases rhymed and it has rhythm. So you can discuss the phonological organization of a book, of a text. Similarly, you can also discuss its graphology, that's its written system, how it is written, how it appears, the symbols and the signs and that are written. So the printed or written signs and symbols are discussed in graphology. They make the graphology of a text. So when you analyze a text, you can analyze it on the level of how the author has organized it on the writing level. So that is another level. Then you have word level, vocabulary level, that is lexical level. So a text can be arranged in many different ways on lexical levels. Authors are free to have a lot of choices from different varieties of language. So they make different choices. So it's up to the author, up to the writer to organize a text in various ways, whatever they like on lexical level. Then these words are of course written together in certain grammatical structure, and you can study the text on syntactic level. Syntax, you know, is the word, a study of word order sentence, and in fact it is this syntax or thus this word text, the sentence structure, that is the topic for our study in today's class. So text is organized on syntactic level, it is written on syntactic level, and as stylisticians or interpreters can analyze text on the same level, that is syntactic level. Then as a result of all this is meaning. So semantics, a text is organized on semantic level, like the author may compose it in a way to give certain meanings in a specific style. So you can analyze a text on semantic level as well. The first point is that the grammar patterns are very significant in the organization of text. All levels are significant, in fact, in the organization of a text. but today's focus for this class is grammar patterns. We see how grammar patterns are used to organize a text in a specific way. Knowing the patterns and their functions help to see how meanings are made in different texts and contexts and provide a basis for interpreting a text. So we have discussed this, that these grammar patterns and their functions they perform in a text and certain contexts as well also provide us a basis for interpreting the text. If we know these grammar patterns, we know how the text works and we know how it gives us meaning. So grammar patterns are significant in providing as a basis for interpreting the text. Grammar is only one level of linguistic analysis. There are other also like lexical, phonological and discursive level. We have just discussed this point, no need to repeat that, but let me explain what is meant by the discursive level. Discursive is adjective from discourse, so we can analyze a text on discourse level as well. Now focus on point of number 2. But grammar is central resource in making and communicating meaning and knowing how a text work. This is also what we have discussed already, that grammar patterns are central in making and communicating meaning, and therefore we need to know grammar and patterns today. So there can be grammatical as well as ungrammatical patterns in meanings. Consider the following examples. Point number 1. Ungrammatical sentences does not make any sense. For instance, we can going to the next disco da. Now these are ungrammatical patterns and ungrammatical structures. So you do not have a correct sentences, and as a result this structure is not communicating in any sense in any sensible way. You can find groups of words belonging together in a pattern, then put all the groups of the words together. Now in this example we see that going am I, that can these are the words that can group together, and D to disco, these words can be grouped together, and we can next are the words that are logically connected. We can rearrange like I'm going am I belong to one group, so we can rearrange them in syntactic structure in a loud structure as I'm going. Then D to disco can be arranged add to the disco. This is another group of word, and we can next can be rearranged in proper order like proper grammatical order as next we can. So first you identify certain groups of word and then you have to combine them together. This is the point. Dear students, we know that going am and I can be rearranged as am I going. In that case it will become a question. The point is that we can identify certain groups of words, that is the word going together, and then we can combine these groups together to make certain grammatical patterns. So out of all these three groups we can have one sentences that I'm going to the disco next weekend. Sentences are made up individual groups of words which form patterns with other groups of words. We have discussed this. The patterns can be fixed or the order can be rearranged. Now, how can certain patterns be fixed? Like to the disco, you cannot rearrange this group of words. The pattern is fixed, but I am going to make it rearrange. It can be rearranged as am I going. In that it can become question, am I going? A rearrangement of patterns may change the meaning. However, we should know that if you rearrange the patterns of certain groups, then of course there will be a change in the meaning. For instance, if you say I'm going, then you rearrange it as am I going? In that case, the statement turns into a question. Similarly, instead of saying I am going to the disco next weekend, if you topicalize next weekend, that's you bring it to the front of tense, then it get interest and importance. It's get stress and importance, and so next week is stressed and it has been made important. So the point is that there are certain patterns which are fixed. You cannot rearrange them like to the disco, and then there are other patterns or groups that you can rearrange, and in that case that can be slight change to the meaning. Okay, there is an activity for you people. Write out a shopping list for your family. Write out 10 items. Suppose you are shopping for your family. You are bringing stuff for your kitchen and for other uses as well, for your iftari, for your sari, and now you have to write down 10 items. Please stop the video here and write out 10 items. And once you have written 10 items, then you can resume. You can play the video again. So please write out 10 items for your family. Yes, I hope you have written the 10 items now and resume the video. Now consider how the list looks like and what the words have in common with each other. You will see that in this text you have words only, you don't have sentences, you don't have words like we in this, you don't have verb in it in this list, but still the text can work so well by its own, on its own. You know that you have created a text that is on a page, and probably you have arranged the word vertically, not horizontally. Probably horizontal arrangement is also placement, that is list-wise, top, bottom, in. But you have written the items vertically and there is no complete sentence, there are no verbs, there are no objects and subjects, there are only just nouns. But this example tells us how the nouns alone can stand our text, how non-texts create meaning, and how they can create meaning by themselves without being connected to the other words that I have just mentioned. So we know that nouns are very much effective in creating and organizing our text. Okay, now you will see that in contrast to the word like we, in, that is pronoun, that is in as a preposition, and this, that is involving extra. Nouns can be make meaningful text on their own. Noun can form noun patterns. Nouns are not just single words, they form patterns with other words to form noun phrases. Now this is also very interesting, that in the activity we saw that there are single nouns and they stood as a separate text. They could generate meaning. You could interpret the text, you could easily read the text and do your shopping and bring the stuff to your home. But other than the word themselves, the noun themselves, you can have nouns together. They can form pattern with other words and thus they can form noun phrases. Again, such phrases can stand on their own. For example, as the title of a book, story, menu, and as in front of shop, for instance, the title of the book, the study of language. Now this is a noun phrase. It is not a complete sentence. It does not have a verb. It does not have a subject and object. And it is just a noun phrase. We study language. It can make you understand what is the book about. By looking at the title, you can guess what the book is about. Similarly, if you are going to a city, you have one word written, that is London, single noun. So you still can understand that single-handedly qualifies as a text, because it tells you that you are entering London. So that is example of single word. So there can be noun can be combined to make phrases. For instance, if we say homemade recipe. Now recipe is a noun. It combines with homemade, which is adjective here, modifier here, and this noun phrase tells you a lot about the menu. Clear? Okay, point number 3. Writers of all kind different texts regularly make creative and communicative use of nouns and noun patterns. A good example is the poem, of course, that we'll discuss later. Here we see, this is a poem, dear students. I'll attach its PDF with a lecture on KCMS. So you can read this text from there also. Here is the picture. You have to read this, and in the first read you have to analyze it for noun patterns. Other level as well. We discussed that at any text is organized on phonological level, graphological level, lexical level, syntactic level, semantic level, and so on. Clear? So you can stylistically analyze this text, and of course this is just a first step. I will be explaining all these things to you people, but at this moment I just want you people to give it the first read and look for certain patterns if you can find, especially the grammar pattern and more specifically the noun phrases if you can find in them. So this is your task. So please do not read any commentary or any book on this level. On this level you just need to focus on text yourself and try to find out noun phrases, and maybe if you can find out anything and interesting or striking in graphology and other levels also, it is good. Now remember one thing, when you do stylistic analysis, there are two important rules or questions for stylistic analysis. Please recall from lecture number 1, we discussed that whenever you do stylistic analysis, you assume you have two roles and you have two questions in front of you. Role is one of linguist role, and role number 2 is that is of critic role. As a linguist, you ask the question, what language rule have been followed and violated? As a critic, you try to interpret, you see why the rule have been followed or why have been violated. You need to know the purpose or effect of the rules that have been broken or the language rule that have been followed. I repeat, whenever you do stylistic analysis, it comprises of two questions. Number 1, what language have been rule violated and why so in the first role you assume the role of a linguist, and in the second slot you do critical analysis or interpretation. In linguistic level, we see how phonology, graphology, syntax, semantics, vocabulary, the lexical choices, these things are arranged, okay. And in this second, we assume that rule of a critic. You try to answer why the language has been arranged in this way, why the rules have been broken, why certain rules have been followed and other rules have been broken. So these are the two questions that you always need to consider. Please remember, as a teacher, this is my experience, that the student normally focus on one question and ignore the second question. For instance, if we ask them himself, we ask them to analyze a poem, they try to point out language points without interpreting the text. They mean its critic role or interpretation.